Firstly, I'd like to, Auckland Council to thank IMSB for commissioning this report, prepared by PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's a substantial piece of work around looking at what Council is doing with its spend in terms of Māori outcomes.
Can you put the slides up, please, Sandra?
I will say, just point out that there are a couple of amendments to the resolutions in the papers.
So slide 1 shows the 13 findings. We've grouped them into 3 interrelated areas, and there are 13 findings from this report, as the notes up there, and we've deemed to handle them in various ways. So we've grouped together 5, 6, 8 and 9. For example, the strategic alignment. What we're proposing there is that, as I've mentioned before, using the Māori responsiveness framework as a foundation to bring together a 10-year view of council goals and priorities for Māori. This will include elements of the refreshed Auckland Plan, IMSB issues of significance, CCO Māori responsiveness frameworks and existing commitments together into one place. And the purpose of this is to align the group activity to the Auckland Plan IMSB goals for Māori and provide a basis for the assessment of budgets and monitoring. So, just reading straight off there, but really where we're getting to is identifying what the outcomes, goals and priorities over the next 10 years will be in terms of Māori outcomes, and developing this and implementing that performance framework, which will include key performance indicators for council. So that handles those set of findings. If we look at the allocating budgets and improving reporting, which is a key feature of concern today, findings 7, 10, 11 and 12, I'd like to add 2 to that too, I think, actually. But it's basically about refining our processes for the allocation of budgets and of reporting against budgets and outcomes, and that's where we're going to end up as a result of that. And going down into the final box there is transition of Te Toa Takatini, addressing findings 3, 4 and 13. And that's about refining the terms of reference, including the function and purpose, roles and responsibilities, etc., through that governance structure and engagement protocols. A key feature of this is going to be oversight of project initiation, and that's through the IG process or investment group process, and assessments and opportunities for collaboration right across the council group. And I think we've already started work on all of this, and particularly with the CCO and IMSB staff, we've begun that, and the strategic priorities in particular. Allocation of budget to programs and projects that align is going to take some time. We've got KPIs to develop. We think that's going to take us out, several months, 18 months, before we get that work completed. And as I said before, the performance measurement framework is already up, and we're going to start implementing that. Go to slide 2. Go to slide 2, please.
Is there a word missing there in box number 1?
Yes.
The performance framework including key.
Performance indicators.
Key performance indicators. See, there's
You've
a typo
picked
there.
it up. Thank you.
As I said, it would take 18 months to complete this work, working across the council group, including CCOs. We've already started that work. What we're planning to do is September this year, report back on the strategic alignment part of this and the group of actions that are taking place. And then September 2019, the other 2 groups of actions finalise reporting on that. Half yearly as part of our regular existing reporting from Te Waka Angamoa. So they will get these run every 6 months, I suppose. That's what we're planning to do, and get some real advancement in this area.
Councillor Simpson.
Okay, so at the risk, no, not at the risk, I have a real concern about this, and I wasn't really quite sure whether to voice my concern at this item or the one before. But this is a finance meeting, and I'm just, from a purely fiscal perspective, you're not spending the money that's in the budget, right? And you've had a look at there's all sorts of reasons why. But why wouldn't you cut the budget and then come back when you've got yourself sorted out? Because we've got so many areas that we can't fund. We've got this money sitting, waiting for something that never happens. We don't spend it. I don't want to be too controversial, but that just, you know, putting it out there. Yeah, well, it's a finance meeting. If there's any other department of council and we were grossly not delivering on it, well, we'd probably look at it. Why are we looking at this one? If you want my feedback for the F, provide feedback to the leadership group, and that is, well, you know, cut your budget, get yourself organised, and come back and ask when you are organised. But it's wrong that we have money sitting in a budget that is never spent, and it's not just spent once. We've had this, but consistent. I mean, the Pricewaterhouse report goes back and says it again and again and again. So what are we doing about it? Sitting here and going, oh, yeah, obviously you're doing. I'm saying we actually should try and do something. I don't mean to be disrespectful, and I've spoken to Member Taipuri. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but, you know, we need to action first, and then we'll look at it. Just saying.
Well, you've put the question out there, and maybe the next speaker will certainly have a view on that.
Yeah, I will. So do more about it. Don't cut it. Spend it. Do the actions that need to be done. If you had a lot of expenditure that you wanted to set aside in the annual plan that wasn't done, you wouldn't say cut the budget. You'd say get on and do the job that needs to spend the money because you've got the resource. So I think it's a bit of a flipping it the other way. I mean, every time I see a budget from now on that's underspent, I'm going to be saying cut it. But I don't think that's going to go anywhere. So what I'm saying to you is spend it. Do something with it that you said you'd do, like the Mayor has asked. Not dump it all at the end and make it look like the money's... Get value for money. The whole audit was about that, but get on and do the job. And this is what I understand this item's about. This item's about getting it right. So, you know, I think that's the too quick response you know, I'm happy to apply that across the board on finance performance from this day forward on every item that comes up. But I think that I'll get kicked for touch. So I don't want you to keep supporting that view if I can help Councillor Simpson. I think what we want to encourage is the organisation to be better at what it does and delivering outcomes across the board. It would also, when the money's put aside, we actually know why we did that and get on with doing it. But, you know, I mean, last time we heard there was underspend because there was restructuring in different parts of the council and things like that. So those were reasons. But again, it had nothing to do with Māori wanting to achieve the outcomes out in the community. That had to do with an internal organisation needing to get itself structured. So when you say you're actually talking about yourself. You're the one that's in charge along with all the other councillors and the Mayor. So you are the you. So I say the board wants to assist in doing that. It's been trying to do that, working with this team to do that. And cutting the money is exactly the opposite of what's been trying to be proposed to be done here. So I just want to say that in the context of what you've just said. And I'll encourage you, along with everyone else, to do more about spending the money and getting on with it and making effects on the people. So just a couple of things for me is...
Yes, thank you, Member Taipei, because that was really a response to a question, so now you have your speaker.
Yeah, it's a couple of questions really, because one that just keeps sitting beneath the surface, and that is, what I'm hopeful will come out of the resolutions is, do we actually accept the findings? You know? I read the recommendation, and I know other members want to talk this, but it says note the findings. And that just, I think, reflects Councillor Simpson in terms, I understand, but I couldn't wait any longer. I think it's important to get it out, whether this table in particular of the governing body accepts the findings of the independent assessment and the report done by PwC against what's going on, because I certainly do, based on the factual information and evidence that your CCOs and everyone else provided to the auditor. So if we can't get to the past the fact of accepting, we're in deep trouble. So, I mean, it's not to Graham and Amakuta. It's to the mayor, it's to the 20 councillors, it's to the CEO. Do you accept the findings of the report? Because if that's the case, then, and I know Councillor Filipino, sorry, I preempted stuff, but was proposing to put accept in rather than note where he has. Yeah, and that's a key factor here. Because without that, I think you're in denial. And I don't think you're going to get anywhere. So I wanted to put that. The second thing I wanted to speak to is about the reportage. And I know there's a proposal to report back, I guess, against the action plans that we haven't seen yet. Well, I haven't seen. There's a performance framework that you talk about. Well, I may have missed that meeting, but I haven't seen that either. I'd really like to see that stuff to know what we're actually agreeing to in that context. But it's E, recommendation E, another one that says note. And it should be agreed that the Toa Takatini Executive Leadership Group report progress of its action plan to address the findings in the report. Agree, not note. For goodness sake, I mean, well, we keep emphasising that reportage is so important here, to track the money, to track what's going on, to ensure the outcomes are being met. And all I'm saying to you is there's two simple changes in those recommendations and getting on with it. And the one that Councillor Filipino has proposed and the one I propose now in E, instead of note, agree that the Toa Takatini Executive Leadership Group report progress of its action plan and continue on. So I think that's enough to be said because it's really getting on with the business. And I look to councils, chief executives, Mr. Town, and the ELT and the CCOs that make up Te Toa Takatini, the ability to get that aligned and understand its purpose and function proper, and getting on and doing these things that are proposed in this report, and then seeking that reportage back so that we can monitor and make sure that that is happening. So the money that you are setting aside in the LTP and the annual plan is being spent, and as His Worship says, value for dollar for council and for the wider community, in particular the Māori community who's seeking the outcomes. So I've said enough, Mr. Chairman, but I'm, again, if there's a mover for the substantial, I'm happy to be the mover of that, unless Councillor Filipino has through his amendment.
Okay, I'm taking you as the mover and I'm taking Councillor Filipino as the seconder. I have accepted his first amendment and I've also accepted your second amendment in E, and if anyone around the table wants to question that, they can question it in their questions and comments time. So we have Member Hanari.
No. I think my chair's said it all.
Councillor Watson.
Well, no, just going to make a very quick point, and that is that I'd rather money be sitting there waiting to be spent than money spent inappropriately or gone, is often the case. I've listened to the explanation here of the delays, so I don't necessarily feel obliged to join in the lynching gang there just because money hasn't been disposed of. I think.
Not lynching.
Well, not lynching. That's perhaps a bit of a hyperbole, but I think that there's a sense of expectation that if money's in a budget, then it should be spent or it should be got rid of. I think that's not necessarily the right message to be sending out, and I think we have to listen to our officers when they give explanations as to maybe why budgets haven't been spent to the full or as quickly as people would have liked. So I would just say that I don't think that it's necessarily ill-advised for caution to prevail at times. I assume the money can then be spent at an appropriate date if and when it's ready to go. And it's not a matter of cutting the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
There's a couple of things in this report that bothers me, and one is the section on CCO under budget, Auckland Transport, I understand. So $750,000 explanations as to, for each of them, why there was an underspend.
Page, Councillor
Page 35. So we've got Auckland Transport, I've got that. Underneath the Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development, AT'd, but no telling me how much underspend there was. How much was it? And why was the unspent budget from the Maori Tourism Development Programme not rolled forward? So questions like that, they leap out the page at me. I'll keep talking because then I flicked over to the other page that worries me, which is page 81, where there's a whole pile of transformational projects that are excluded from SOIs and not executed. Excluded from SOIs and not executed. Excluded from SOIs. So talk about that one first. Choose AT as an example.
This information has been provided. It was we actually reported on these underspends previously, Finance and Performance Committee meetings, and so it was put in here just to further clarify what it was. The underspend was 217,600, which was reported by AT across 5 projects, representing 27% underspend of the budget.
And any idea why there was no roll forward of the Maori Tourism Development Programme?
The Māori Tourism Development Programme was because, as we had reported earlier, they had been in negotiations to host an event here in Auckland with New Zealand Māori Tourism, and it instead will be hosted in April this year in Northland, right, at Waitangi.
And I suppose my next question is really to the CCO monitoring unit with regard to page 81. What about these inconsistencies? Whose job is it to fix them? Is it ours as politicians or is it yours as staff in the monitoring unit?
Through the chair, it's a very good question. So at the moment, many of our CCOs report in their quarterly reports on their progress against their Māori initiatives, but it's fair to say that they report in whatever way they see fit rather than in a templated sort of way. So what we're really looking to do in the future with Alistair's team is have a much more templated, structured section in their quarterly report that at least allows you to see across the CCOs how they're progressing against their agreed projects and spend. And that sort of puts the onus back on them, if you like. It's one single source of the truth. They like this because it's one report for them instead of several. And it's just a refinement that we need to make. Just follow through SOI actions into quarterly reports and then just have that streamlined reporting.
So we'll see that in the next quarterly presentation then?
I hope so, yes.
Excellent.
We're working on it now.
Good.
So the letters of expectation from the Mayor's office to the CCOs has clarified that, and the SOI is being developed in that space at the moment. So for the next year, that's definitely going to be in place.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Couple of questions. So when we go back to those inconsistencies that Councillor Casey talked about, I took them as it's been happening as business as usual, but it doesn't go in the SOI because it's happening anyway, so it's not measured. Is that when it says page 41? Oh no, it's our 81. When it talks about, like, for example, the BAU projects excluded from SOIs and the CCOs, and basically they're what's been happening, but you're not counting. Is that what I'm saying? It's just not counted as part of the outcomes, but it's actually happening?
Yes, that's right. So
right, so it's not like it's an inconsistency, something hidden. It's just not accounted for in the way we were expecting it to be accounted for.
well, it's inconsistent from the point of view that one CCO might report it and the other one doesn't, doing the
Right,
same
got
thing.
it, got it.
So
Okay, now the other one is page, oh God, now I've got to find it, trying to get back to this, 35, I think. And I want to sort of support what Councillor Simpson was saying, because I see what she means. I'm not saying cutting, I'm saying sometimes I just wonder whether, like, if you look at page 35 and you look at the Auckland Transport underspending on Māori related outcomes, 15, 16, I mean this is miles away. But we're saying, well, let's put 600,000 in the Māori Wardens budget. But it clearly says, well, we didn't have major events, so we're never going to spend that much money because, as it happened, the events weren't there to put them there. So to me, it's like, well, you put 600,000 there, and you were never going to spend that anyway because it was unrealistic, or it was an overly optimistic, or something like that. But then it's reported as, oh, you underspent. But you couldn't have spent it anyway. And the other issue is, like I know on our Western line, we can't seem to get an agreement with the Māori Wardens, so we don't put them on the trains because they won't get police vetted like all our other Māori Wardens in the rest of the region. So you're not going to be able to spend it. So those are the kind of things I think Councillor Simpson's talking about. Another one, number 3 on that, the road safety for Marae, there was a $100,000 budget, but Auckland Transport absorbed it. We didn't need to spend that extra money. So it was actually done, and all that was taken into account and delivered, but now we're saying it's an underspend. So it makes it look like we're not spending any money there, but we are. We're just accounting for it in a different way. And I just think the bland figures look like, well, that's what it says here, Member Henare.
No,
if you look at
they didn't spend it, that's all it says.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is, and I don't need an answer from you, what I'm saying is that we...
You just replied.
Point of order, Mr Chairman. Have I got the floor?
Good. That's great.
Thanks.
You do have the floor.
So what I'm asking is there a better way of doing this where when we put the budgets that we are kind of realistic and because what I'm hearing is, there's all these excuses, but they're not, there are explanations to me. Some of them should have been delivered maybe, but some of these, it's just... what gets reported is didn't spend, we're not doing Māori we're not delivering Māori outcomes. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, in general, have we got specific projects where we go, that's how much it costs, we're going to do that, or we're just going, we want these outcomes, and it's hard to quantify the amount of money needed for that. And that's what I'm trying to tighten up. And also then that would kind of go, right, yeah, here's the project, it's going to cost us much money, let's do it. Because all I keep saying is Māori outcomes. I want to know what's the actual project so we can make sure we're really identifying and that it's realistic.
Right, well, Rosa's going to ride to the rescue.
I think those are great questions, and I think what needs to happen here is just a short sojourn back into the past and look at where we were back in 2014, 15, 16, is that we actually couldn't quantify how much we were spending on Māori outcomes at first. And so our very first exercise was to actually gather together all of the budgets and look at what we had anticipated and intended to spend, and that was where we started, and that was a great place to start. So what you were seeing back then was anticipated spend, if you like, based on what people thought they might be able to do during the year. So underspends in that context were exactly that. Sometimes projects didn't happen. So underspend is a sort of a very generic word applied to a whole bunch of circumstances. It's true to say that in the interim we haven't done as much as we should on getting together council's joined up 10-year priority plan, if you like, towards Māori outcomes and what were our priorities. That's the work that we've got going on now, and we anticipate what that will allow us to do is to assess some projects one versus another, because at the moment we don't have that criteria and we don't have that ability to seek the value that you're looking for and to give you assurances that yes, this project is a really good one, you should put your money into this, you should spend more on this or less on that. We haven't had that framework, but now we're working on that, and we haven't shopped it with you yet, which is why I haven't put it up today, but literally across the Auckland Plan, the Kaitiaki Forum, the IMSB's Māori Plan and their issues of significance, we've looked at what everyone's been telling us needs to occur and are working on 7 priority areas now that we'd like to put before you and before the board to have a platform to go forward to make these value for money judgments. We've never had that before. So alongside that, what you always do when you put in place a plan is some measures. How will we know that we're investing in the right places, on the right things? That's part of that work that's ongoing now. So to answer your question, yes, there had been underspend, but to be honest, sometimes those were just the very beginnings of us understanding what we were spending. The disciplines going forward are much greater. The investment group will be one part of it, but to be honest, that's just one decision at a time. Is this project a good idea? If you've got no framework to assess that against, then it is just one decision at a time. So we're hoping to put in place for you and working hard now, leading up to this LTP, to put those value for money judgments, to be able to assess some things, you know, the level of spend against those priorities to you. So I think those were great questions, thank you, and we do want to be bringing that work to you going forward.
Thank you.
Good questions, Councillor Pepper. Good answers as well. Councillor Philippine.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got questions but comments, so shall we wait until after that, Chair? Okay, then I'll carry on.
Go for it, bro.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Chair, look, I wanted to sort of say that I look forward to the 18 months. As highlighted in number 6, that is the full consideration implementation of the findings will take approximately 18 months with 2 checkpoints. I hope one day, and I'm quite confident that this day will come, is that another independent report will get done by the Independent Māori Statutory Board, and everything will say that we are fulfilling our obligations under the Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I'm confident that that will happen based on the previous item and speaking and asking the Chief Executive, but also confident knowing that this will happen. When, I don't know, but it will happen, and that's based also on number 10 of our report, which outlines all the leadership, the executive, the Toa Takatini Executive Leadership Group. Chair, positive with this particular report, but the last thing for me is number 35. That's the one that I think would dictate what happens in the next 18 months. And that is the fact that there's no additional resources at the moment that are there. I'm hoping that during the intervening 18 months or through to September 2019 that there could be some discussion and movement around getting resources to fulfil or to complete the report based on the number 35, no additional resources. So, Chair, look, I am, and I'm quite, again, confident that there will be a independent report saying that we are actually achieving what we're supposed to do. Kia ora.
Member Taipuri. Oh, sorry, Member Hanari, sorry.
Yeah, just a comment, Mr. Chair, and that is that we shouldn't, it's my personal point of view, is that we shouldn't line up Graham's team and saying why we haven't achieved blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's the responsibility of somebody else, why there hasn't been the achievements that we thought were going to happen. I'm also worried in here about something that bothers me, and that's item number 18 about Māori wardens. And recently there was a strike on our trains for that simple reason about security, an extra man or extra person, excuse my language, extra staffing, and the owners, you know, they wanted a single person, blah, 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 which would mean no security. But I see that there was money available for wardens to become those, and that comes out of the council's coffers. I'm just trying to wonder how that works, where the company that runs the trains should have been paying for those. But that's just it's just something that I picked up from here, and maybe we should be spending that money on something that will get results. I tend to agree with Councillor Simpson, and I think when we're looking at stuff like this, it actually goes back to the day where we sit down, or where someone sits down and says, we should spend such and such on this. Now, these are the outcomes that we need to get. It's just like the driver's licence thing. I'm shocked at that, because I know that all these young people out there haven't got a licence. And it would have been quite an easy thing to get them together and get a licence for them. And then you can measure it. There was no measurables in here. I don't believe for 1 minute the story that people overestimated, over-budgeted for something. I just don't believe it, because that, in the big scheme of things, is a pittance, really. So my view is that next time we do it, and we have, we've got all of this time, and the team are putting together something that is robust, that it can be measured, and woe betide if we don't meet our targets, blah, 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 and that's great. But I don't think that the real people who failed in the first instance are in front of us, okay? I think there are other people that should have been lined up and asked those same questions as a result of our work and other people's work. So that's all I wanted to say.
Wally, would you like to comment on the Maori Wardens?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So the arrangement in terms of the Māori Wardens is, Transdev, the train operators, have under their contract with Auckland Transport, have a whole bunch of KPIs, including safety and security. For special events in particular, there's a requirement to provide extra resource, and we provide funding to Transdev for that, but the contractual relationship is between Transdev and the Wardens organisations. In the 2015-16 year, as is outlined here, there were a lesser number of events that required that resource, and partly that was because a number of large sporting organisations, think Auckland Rugby, think New Zealand Cricket, for example, chose not to have integrated ticketing for their major events, so not to provide free train or bus services with the event ticket. So therefore the extra security, the extra services rather, the extra train and bus services weren't put on, therefore the extra security wasn't needed. I think the earlier report, item 13 I think, or 14, the item previous to this, shows that we're forecast in the current year to spend up to close to that level that is in the budget this time round. Member Henare just also briefly touched on the road safety program. Again, that was a timing issue. We needed a dedicated resource to come on board to deliver that program, which runs in Kura, Marae, and elsewhere. And again, your earlier report showed that in the current financial year, we will go close to delivering on that. And I would point out, I think Councillor Filipaina made the point around the road safety budget. That was $100,000 capex. We did the design for that project in-house. The job was done, but it is shown as an underspend because we didn't draw down the money. I would think from a finance committee perspective, that's a bit of a win-win, you know. Capital not drawn down, job done, you know. In terms of value for money, I don't think you can get much better than that.
Right, thank you. The Mayor will close the debate, and he'll close the debate because I've asked him whether he would accept and show the leadership by moving this, because Member Taipuri did before, but in effect it is a report commissioned by the Independent Maori Statutory Report for themselves, but to present to us, so it's probably not appropriate. But I think by having the Mayor move and seconded by Councillor Filipaina, it does show the commitment to especially clause B and the addition of the word accept. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to move that way and speak briefly to it. In moving it, I want to accept the amendment by David Typery, of course we should agree to the recommendations of this report. It's a professional and competent report, and it's highlighted shortcomings that it's past time that we addressed. And why is this so important? You know, we've just debated earlier on in this financial year our Auckland plan, and one of the critical things about our Auckland plan was to make our city an inclusive city. And it won't be inclusive if we allow so many of our people of Maori descent not to achieve to their full potential, to suffer from disadvantage and underachievement. We simply, as a city, cannot afford that cost. We're talking about $9 million here, but we waste 10 times that amount when we leave 14% of our population to underachieve and to be overrepresented in all of the negative social statistics. Do we have a responsibility in this area? Of course we do. Do we have to be an inclusive city? That is critical to us being world-class and a place where people want to live. So I happily endorse this. And let me just repeat what the summary of the PwC is. And I'm going to finish on this point. In the last paper, I talked about the need to actually not just spend money, but to deliver outcomes. And what this report says, to be fair to Te Toa Takatini, it says, well, we have moved. We actually now have oversight of the projects and the activities, but we are looking still at project outputs like the achievement of project tasks, and we're monitoring process, we're reporting on requirements, but we're not tracking the delivery of outcomes. And that's what we have to do. I can't endorse strongly enough what Rose Leonard said about value for money out of what we're doing. We need these outcomes, and we need to know the money we're investing in these outcomes is delivering them. If we don't know that, then we're going nowhere. So let's take this report by PwC very seriously. Let's acknowledge and applaud the Independent Maori Statutory Board for bringing it to us, and now let's get on and do the job and act on it. So I move accordingly, Mr Chairman. Maybe Member Typery would like to second that one.
I've taken it.
It's already been seconded, Your Worship.
I don't think it's appropriate, and I appreciate the offer.
David, Member Taipari would be important that himself and His Worship the Mayor move and second this, so I've got no issues with Member Taipari, the Chair.
I take on board what the Chairman says. To try to remove me away from being the potential deliverer to say how great it is, and you should agree with it.
Yeah. So sorry, Alf, I'm happy to accept that you're seconding of it.
All good. It was already up there.
Anyway, I'm the determiner of this. Okay. So we'll put it. We have a mover and a second. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Stewart, you want to record it? Okay, Councillor